Think for a second about what it would take to make you a killer. What level of poverty, what level of depravity would it take before you would engage in a murder? What if in the midst of your struggle, while you're starving half to death, the person next to you is successful beyond your wildest dreams? How long does it take a normal, good person to snap under these conditions of extreme inequality? I suspect that if you ask yourself this question, you would think, well, it would take a lot for me to get that far. I don't think I could even do it. I don't think that I'm capable of going that far. But when left with this question for long enough, when answering it honestly enough, I think that most people would find that it takes a lot less than they'd like to admit. Perhaps all it would really take is the perception of extreme unfairness to drive you to do something horrific. This is the problem that's at the core of Parasite, the 2019 Oscar winner that we're dissecting today. So what exactly does it take to drive you to murder? Let's take a look at how the Kim family got there and what conclusions there are to draw. And stick around to the end when we'll give the movie a score before we sum up. We are introduced to the Kim family in their dingy semi-basement apartment from which they steal their neighbor's Wi-Fi, they open their windows for free pest control, and they find themselves threatening pizza place employees in order to make a living. The early impression of the Kim is one of extreme desperation. With the entire family out of work, it's clear that they're scrounging for every dollar that they can muster. However, it isn't really clear if we're supposed to see this family as the protagonists of the film. The movie is intentionally leaving how we feel about the Kims kind of ambiguous. Though the viewer is sympathetic to the Kims, it isn't suggested that they are particularly good people. As I mentioned, they're living off stolen Wi-Fi and idle threats. It isn't till Ki-woo's friend comes with a sketchy job offer and a rock symbolizing prosperity that the tide seems to turn in favor of the Kims. But it's not like they earned anything. It's not like they did anything noble for this tide to start to turn. They were kind of just saved by an enigmatic stranger that we don't really know. And on top of this, in order to maintain this job, Ki-woo is forced to lie about his credentials to do it. After the Kims come into a bit of money thanks to the cushy job with the easily manipulated Miss Choi, the first thing the Kims do is go to a buffet to eat their fill. As understandable as this action might be to indulge yourself in a gluttonous feast right after a long battle with food insecurity, this strikes me as another spot where the movie is leaving your opinion about the Kims ambiguous. This can seem like an obvious choice, but it's also a pretty blatant waste of their money. They'd be better advised to get their Wi-Fi turned back on and get some of the phones working, which they do eventually do, and stop at a grocery store and stock up for food for a week or more. Instead, it seems like they're blowing some money in a frivolous way that leaves you to wonder if the Kims are responsible for their own position in life. And Parasite doesn't shy away of putting at least some blame for the Kims' position at the feet of them. It's clear that they're willing to engage in considerable morally ambiguous behavior in order to improve their position. They scam their way into the job with the Parks family, and early in the film, Ki-woo seems to be ready to at least seriously injure a drunk guy who's peeing in the street. Ki-woo, being kind of the leader of the moral decay, also doesn't shy away from entering into a relationship with a 16-year-old child. The film is trying to set up the characters so that the audience sees them in the same way that they believe the rich would see them. They set them up to act like parasites. They even compare each other to cockroaches.
그래. 이러다가 갑자기 박 사장이 집에 온다 쳐봐. 김기택이인가? 바퀴벌레처럼 샤샤샤샥 숨겠지? 얘들아, 왜 니네 우리 집 그거 있잖아, 형광등 밤중에 그냥 탁 그냥 바퀴벌레들이 그냥 숨는 거.
At the first opportunity, the family decides to sleep in this rich family's home and eat their food and drink their liquor. This display of frivolous gluttony is eventually what leads to their downfall that we'll discuss in a little bit. While the Kims invade the home of this rich family they're employed by, we get a little bit of insight about how they feel about the rich people.
이 사람은 이미 참 순진해. 착하고. 부자인데 착하다니까.
부자인데 착해가 아니라 부자니까 착한 거지. 뭔 소리인지 알아? 솔직히 이 돈이 다 나한테 있었어 뭐. 나는 더 착하지. 착해.
It's a disrespectful tone to take, especially toward people who seemingly have been nothing but kind to the Kims. We do get some glimpses of the Parks looking down on the Kims, with the consistent references towards crossing the line and talk of the smell of the subway people. It's obvious that the Parks wish to remain separated, as though their high class makes them above people like the Kims. The Kims, however, use this to find an easy way to excuse the actions they took to scam this family into employing them. It's obvious to them that they too would be so kind kind if they only had all this money. But because they're poor, being kind isn't an option for them. Taking advantage of people by being so cutthroat as to get two presumably lower class people fired so that they can take their place is simply doing what's necessary to survive. The demand of their situation is to do whatever it takes to move up. It's this perspective that gets them caught up in the situation with the previous housekeeper and her husband. It would have been easy enough for the Kims to deal with the situation where there was a man living in a secret basement bunker had they not crossed the line. In fact, if it had been enough for the Kims to simply keep working this relatively cushy job and making a decent income, it's likely that they could have slowly pulled themselves out of their abysmal living conditions. But it seems that they couldn't help themselves but to have a taste of the luxurious lifestyle that comes with a free stay in someone else's house. So, when the old housekeeper shows up and reveals her secret and eventually catches on to the Kim's scheme, they immediately go overboard, fighting them off, tying them up, and even kicking them down the basement stairs to stay in this comfortable lifestyle. It seems that the taste of the good life was so sweet to the Kims that they are willing to do anything to keep it alive. So after a close brush with being caught and actually scurrying around like cockroaches, hiding under tables and beds, they scurry back down into the depths of my next point. After escaping the Parks home, the Kims make the long trek down from the highland area of the Parks home to the low swamp area of their semi-basement apartment to find that it has been flooded with sewage water. They descend like rats into the sewer that they live in to find all of their possessions destroyed. In the mess, Ki-woo finds the stone that was supposed to bring them prosperity and wealth. He clings to it, bringing it around and plotting what to do next about the mess that they left in the basement bunker of the Parks house. It's this juxtaposition of having a moment of living in this nice dry house, watching the rainstorm on the hillside, to going back to their dank, filthy apartment and it being completely destroyed, that is the catalyst for the third act of the movie. After seeing their house flooded with sewage, the Kims' attitude towards the Parks changes drastically. And after all that happened to them, how can you not think, how possibly could the Parks have so much while the Kims have so little? What possibly could this family have done to deserve all this wealth while their family is living in squalor in a destroyed apartment that's covered in sewage? The subtle insults the Parks throw towards the Kims start to hurt a little bit more, and the Kims grow faces of disgust when talking with the Parks. It becomes increasingly difficult for the Kims, especially Mr. Kim, to keep hiding his hatred for the Parks. This hatred eventually leads to the brutal attack on the Kims and the eventual murder of Mr. Parks. The biggest show of disrespect towards the Kims from the Parks is the commentary on Mr. Kim's smell. It's made out to be a poor smell. It's kind of a joke among the Parks. It's the smell of the people on the subway. We see that the Kims all have to use different soaps in order to cover up that they all smell alike, but Mr. Kim ends up becoming a bit notorious for his smell anyway. While he's hiding away from the Parks underneath their table, he overhears this commentary on his scent. In this same scene, we hear again the commentary on crossing the line. They cross this line into the rich lifestyle that they don't deserve, and the Parks work hard to keep them separate. This use of the line is not only used in the dialogue, but in the cinematography as well, and I'll touch on that more later. It's clear that the Parks wish to separate themselves from the lower class people that they employ. They look down on them. They see the Kims the same way the audience does, the same way the Kims see themselves, as a parasite feeding off of the rich. The smell becomes the ultimate symbol of disrespect towards Mr. Kim, and after Gwon-se attacks Ki-jung, it's Mr. Parks recoiling at the scent that drives Mr. Kim to kill him. In this moment, it's over for Mr. Kim. His daughter is dead, his lie is about to be discovered, so his hatred takes over, and he puts a knife through the heart of Mr. Park, and then recoils like a cockroach back down into the basement. Finally, we have a stone, the representation of wealth and prosperity that also represents all of the things that led to the Kim's downfall. The stone brought by Ki-woo's rich friend Min is meant to bring them wealth and prosperity, and after receiving it, he managed to swindle his way into a cushy job working for a rich family. He even manages to get his sister one as well. Finally, the whole family is employed by the Parks, after they secretly conspire to get 2 employees fired and replace them. It seems as though the tide is finally turning for the Kims. The stone has brought what it promised. They're starting to find a decent income and even consider leaving their dingy apartment. But it's once they cross the line that their luck turns bad. When their home is destroyed by an overflowing sewer, Ki-woo finds the stone. He says it follows him. It calls out to him. And why wouldn't it? It seems to have gotten you this far. So maybe now, in your time of most need, it can solve all of your problems. In this way, the stone represents a way out for the Kims. He takes the stone back with him to the Parks house, apparently ready to use it to kill the couple living in the basement and to cement the Kim's place in the Park's home. But he trips. He leaves himself vulnerable to an attack by Gwon-se, who attacks him and uses the stone to hit him over the head, nearly killing him. After this, Gwon-se stabs Ki-jung and goes on a rampage at Da-song's birthday party. It's this rampage that triggers Mr. Kim's attack on Mr. Park. Apparently for no other reason than revenge for the way Mr. Park looked at Mr. Kim, he gets a knife to the heart. In this act, he sinks as low as he can go. He fulfills the prophecy of what others expected out of him. He becomes a real parasite, living in the secret underground bunker of the next rich family who moves into the house. This movie gives a pretty intense commentary on the socioeconomic culture in South Korea, which is pretty well mirrored by the economic culture in America. The take of the film, while definitely not being favorable of the Kims, also allows some of the blame to lie on the feet of society. After all, the Kims were left so desperate by a society that didn't care about them, they felt like their only option was to swindle this rich family into giving them all jobs and money. In the end, however, it's the greed of the Kims, not the Parks, that destroys them. It seems to me that the biggest problem that faced the Kims was not how the Parks saw them, but how they saw themselves. They excused their actions as justified and even admirable because they had been living in squalor. They at no point considered themselves to be any better than a group of low-level scam artists. And why would they? Everybody else looked down on them too. Even Ki-woo's friend Min looks down on them. It's vaguely suggested that Min wants Ki-woo to take the tutoring job because he doesn't believe that Da-hai would be interested in him. If the entire society sees nothing more in you than a subway person, a scam artist, or a lowly cab driver, then sinking to that level and becoming resentful about your lot in life, resentful about the unfair treatment that you're receiving, is only natural. And could all that drive you to kill as well? Is Mr. Kim really so evil, or is he just down on his luck and tired of being kicked around by society? Who or what is to blame for his actions? We'll discuss all of that and try to sum up this video right after I give Parasite a score. Starting with the plot, which is absolutely fantastic. The tension held throughout the film is amazing. It's the kind of movie that you can't take your eyes off of. I think Parasite has to get a 10 out of 10 for its plot. The writing is a bit difficult for me to judge given that I don't speak Korean. I really don't know if the dialogue is natural. I think there is kind of a bit of a miss in the messaging when Mr. Kim is telling Ki-woo not to make any plans because no plans mean that your plans don't fail. And there's a spot when Gwon-se is taped to a pole and the tape is completely secure in one scene, and then in the very next scene it has been ripped so much that he can now free himself. Otherwise it seems quite good. I think I'll give it a 7 out of 10. The cinematography is a real strong point of Parasite. It uses a lot of visual cues to further the plot. The use of black and white clothing to separate the families, as well as the use of lines as a creative way to show when someone is crossing the line or overstepping their bounds as a poor person and trying to become somewhat equal to the Parks. It's really beautiful and really well done. The cinematography is an easy 10 out of 10. The characters are also compelling. The whole Park family has a significant arc as they fall into greed and gluttony, and the Parks serve mostly to set the stage for the Kim's rage, but they're still well written and they get a 7 out of 10. The theme in Parasite is definitely the strongest point in the film. It takes a look at class disparity and the desperation of living in squalor, and it gives insight into how this can cause evil to rise up at a person. It gets another 10 out of 10. Overall, Parasite gets a 9.5 out of 10, which I believe is the best score that I've ever given a movie. But what does all this mean? Why is Parasite a story that applies to the life of your average viewer? To me, Parasite is a warning not to fall into vengeful anger at society, even when you're being treated unfairly. You can only affect real social change by acting out the change that you want to see, and Parasite shows exactly the opposite of this. The Kims are disrespected by the Parks, but rather than earning their respect by treating them well even though they're disrespected, they act exactly how the Parks think they would act and disrespect them right back. They assume the Parks are only nice because they're rich. They assume that it's fine for them to indulge in the luxurious lifestyle in their home simply because it's so apparent that the Parks' life is so much better that taking advantage of them is not something that the Kims even feel is close to wrong. If you want social change, all you can do is be more than society thinks of you. And if you allow yourself to become embittered with resentment and rage, I think that you will undoubtedly find that you're capable of murder in far less dire circumstances than you ever would have believed. Thank you for watching this video. Check out another one of my videos. I just did one on Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and make sure to hit like and subscribe and leave a comment on your way out.